Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. My name is Scott and this is Blue Liner Milsurps. This is the channel all about military surplus firearms. Hey, if you liked the video today, please hit the like button, subscribe if you'd like to see more of the content, and leave a comment or ask a question down below. Today we're going to start a series of videos that's going to run for a while, and it's going to be all about the U.S. service rifle. And that's what this series is. U.S. service rifles running basically from the Civil War era to the end of the Korean War. What we're going to be talking about are main battle rifles of the U.S. infantry, starting with the end of the Civil War and going through the end of Korea. Because that's kind of the focus of my collection. My collection kind of starts at the beginning of the black powder cartridge era, which is right around the Civil War and the end of the Civil War. And it goes all the way through until we end up with more fully automatic infantry weapons, which kind of started around the Korean War. So that's what the focus of my collection is. And so what we're going to do is start a series on main battle rifles of the United States military. We're not going to talk about secondaries. We're not going to talk about carbines or handguns or anything like that, or machine guns or mortars or anything. We're going to stick to the main battle rifles, starting with this one, which came out shortly after the Civil War. This is a model 1873 U.S. Springfield Trapdoor, and I'm going to tell you all about this, and we're going to take some looks at it here pretty soon. Before we do that, in order to really understand history, we have to put it in context. We have to understand where things came from. So before we talk about the Springfield, we have to talk about what the U.S. infantry was using before this, which was, of course, the Civil War. This particular model came out in 1873, and I'll talk more about that later. But before that, we were using muzzleloader Springfield musket rifles. So let me bring one over here. Now, this is not an actual 1861 Springfield. This is a reproduction of one. So this is an Italian reproduction, Pieta or Uberti, I'm not sure which one. But this is actually a functioning 1861 Springfield and was made as a reproduction. So this is what the U.S. Army was using in the Civil War. You can see here on the end, this is the breech end of the musket rifle. And this is, the breech end is the end nearest the stock, and the muzzle would be way down here where the bullets come out. Of course, these are muzzle loaders. So in order to load this, we have to put our powder down here, and then we have to put our projectile down here. For this, mostly through the time period, we were using this. This is a 58 caliber. We called it a mini ball. It's actually Minié ball because it was developed by a French artillery officer by the name of Minié. So this was a particularly brutal projectile during the Civil War. You can see it has 3 rings down here. They would put some lube in there. It is hollow on the bottom. So what they would do is put the powder down here, a powder charge, and then they would lube this up, and there would usually come lube. And then you put the bullet in there, and then they would take the ramrod and ram it all the way down. After that, we will come to this end, and this is the firing mechanism right here. This is what is known as a lock system. This is a percussion cap system. Before this, they had flintlocks, but that's not today's discussion. They would use what's known as a percussion cap, and I'll show you right here what that is. So you can see it's just a little cap, and it goes on. We'll cock this all the way back so you can see there's a little nipple right here. Right there, where the percussion cap would go on. The soldier, after loading it, would fire it. The percussion cap would send a charge down into the breech after you had put the powder and the projectile down there, setting off the powder, shooting the projectile out of the muzzle. And that's how it worked. A trained soldier could get 3 to 4 shots a minute. And that's what we were using throughout the Civil War. Now, there were actually cartridge guns available, the Sharps and some other ones, but those were very expensive, and the U.S. government did not feel the need to arm all of its soldiers with those types of rifles, so they stuck with the muzzle loading. When the Civil War ended in 1865, a lot of the countries in Europe who had been watching the U.S. Civil War saw how the war was fought, and they also had percussion musket rifles. Many of them looked at what some of the other companies in the United States was doing, like Winchester. In 1866, Winchester came out with the Winchester Model 1866 lever action repeating rifle. It had a tube magazine. You could fill it with rounds, and then you would work the lever, and the lever would work an elevator that would bring the round up, and the lever then would push it into the chamber. And it kind of had the nickname that you could load it on Sunday and shoot all week. So they looked at that, and they realized that all those things that we were shoving down the muzzle, you could actually put into a single metallic cartridge. You could take the powder, you could take the primer, or what would have been the percussion cap, and the projectile, and put it all into one single metallic cartridge. So a lot of countries in Europe started to do that. The U.S., not wanting to be left out, wanted to do that for its army as well. Now, we weren't conquering any other European countries, but we were moving west, and we were having increased number of conflicts with the Native Americans as we moved west. So they wanted to arm the U.S. Army with one of these cartridge type firearms. But they had a problem. Sitting in the U.S. Army's inventory were all these leftover Springfields, 1861 Springfields from the Civil War. So what do? Well, step in a man by the name of Erskine Allen, Allin. He was the chief and master armorer at the Springfield Armory, who actually came up with a way to take the Springfield 1861 and turn it into a breech loading cartridge firearm. And what they did was, first of all, they put a sleeve down the barrel, so they changed it from 58 caliber to 50 caliber, and then they cut the back off the breech and put a separate mechanism that had a trap door on it. And I'm going to show you how all of that works here in just a second. So it was called the Allen conversion. They were doing that to all of these leftover Civil War Springfields. Eventually they would run out of those, and they decided to make a purposeful built Springfield trap door. And that is how we get to this. In 1873, the U.S. military adopted the Springfield trap door as the first purposeful built black powder cartridge rifle for all of U.S. forces. So let's go over the rifle and show you how it works. So turn it around here so that you can hopefully see. So basically it looks a lot like the 1861 Springfield, with the exception of we're not muzzle loading it, we're loading it back here at the breech. And it uses what's known as a trap door. So here on top of the breech, you can see a door here. We make sure that we have this in what's known as half cock. There are only a 2 or 3 places that this can go. It can be fully fired, half cock, which is the safe door, or we can pull it all the way back into fire. And there's a little lever here that you push up, and the door opens, and you can single load around. You would take your cartridge and load it in here. Now, these were made in 45 caliber, whereas the Allen conversions were in the 50 caliber. They brought this down to 45 caliber, and these rounds are called 45-70. They're called 45-70 because it's a 45 caliber bullet, and it takes 70 grains of black powder, and that's how they named the cartridges. And the soldier would be expected to maintain a rate of fire anywhere of 10 to 12 rounds a minute. You would open the trap door, insert your round, close the door, cock it back, and fire. Now, to make it go even faster, they put in a little ejector over here. So I'm going to show you how that works by using an already spent cartridge. So the soldier would put it in. He would close the trap door, cock it back, fire it. Then he would put it back on half cock, and when he opened the door, this little ejector would eject out the previous round, as you're about to watch. See it come flying out, and that way they didn't have to go digging around. So it was a single shot rifle, and it was very easy to use. It did have a very simple set ladder sight here on the rear sight, and just a simple blade on the front. It did have a cleaning rod. It's not screwed in, actually. You can see on the cleaning rod there's kind of a little recess or an indent here, and you could pull it out very easily if you needed to put it in to go down and get any black powder fouling out of there. It was a very simple rifle for a very simple soldier. Now, there were different versions of this made. For the cavalry, there was a carbine version of this. And probably the most famous battle that this was used in was General Custer and the 7th Cavalry and the Battle of Little Bighorn. They did not, this is an infantry version. They had a cavalry version, which was considerably shorter. And it was a cavalry version that they were using at Little Bighorn, not the big infantry. But they made a lot more infantry rifles than they made cavalry rifles. So as I stated, the cartridge here is in 45-70. The barrel is 32.5 inches long. They made this version starting in 1873, and they made them all the way till 1884. In 1884, they upgraded to a little better model, and then a much better model in 1888, where they changed the rear sights to what's called the Buffington sight, and they changed the cleaning rod to a bayonet, kind of a ramrod bayonet that they used. This version, the 1873, used a simple cruciform bayonet. It's the exact same one that they used in the Civil War. And one of the reasons in 1888 that they went to that ramrod bayonet was because they ran out of these left over from the Civil War. And it simply goes on to the end over the sight. It turns, you put it on, and then you twist the collar to lock it in. And that's how the bayonet works. Now, these were used by the infantry and the cavalry up through the Spanish-American War. And when we think of the Spanish-American War, we think of the Rough Riders and the Craig Jorgensen, something that will be covered in another video coming up. But they also use this rifle as well. There were actually quite a few troops that went to Cuba, and later in the Philippine insurrection, of reservists or National Guard troops that were still carrying the Springfield Trapdoor. So it was used, although I think it was mainly used in the Indian Wars in the West. So roughly they made, between all three models of this, roughly about 567,000 of these. And this one is in very good condition. This one itself was made in 1882. So obviously it was not a Little Bighorn, because that took place in 1876. So there's no bolt to take apart to show you how to take apart, because all it is a trap door. Once again, you just flip the door up, insert your round, close the door, cock the hammer back, and fire. And then when you open the door again, it will then eject the spent casing so that you can put a new round in very quickly. It's a very simple thing. A couple things I want to show you if you ever do decide to get one of these and take them apart. Now, it's very easy to take apart except for one part, and that's the trap door. So taking it apart is very simple. It's really just a couple of springs here. You take these off, and there's one tang screw on the back. Now there's two screws on the side here that you can see. If you take those off, you release the lock over here. So on the lock on the other side of this lock, so let me go ahead and take it out and I will show it to you. So one of the easy ways to get the lock out, I'll show it to you, is to just take these screws, take them out about a half an inch, and then just push, and that'll push the lock out. And then you can take the rest, because those locks sit in there really tight. If you take the screws all the way out, sometimes it's kind of tough to get that lock all the way up. But on the other side of the lock is a flat spring, and that's how the lock works here with the flat spring. This flat spring right here with this mechanism is what causes this to go back and slam forward when you pull the trigger. One thing you should never, ever, 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 ever do if you take a lock apart is mess with this flat spring. It takes a special tool to take it off, because if you try to take it off without that tool, it's going to go flying and you'll never get it back on because it is under tension. So don't ever take these flat springs off unless you really know what you're doing and you have the tools to do it. The other thing when it comes to disassembly is the trap door. Now, you can see that this trap door, I hope you can see it here, is held in by a pin, a very large pin that on the other side here has a tang that comes down. That tang goes underneath the wood. If you're going to take this trap door off and take that pin out, make sure you take it out of the wood. Take the barrel bands off, take this screw out, and separate it first. Because if you try to take the pin out here with that tang that goes down there inside the wood, and you start banging on this side, you're gonna damage the wood on this side. So don't ever do that. And if you do, understand that getting this back on is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, because of where the ejector sits right here on the inside. When you take this pin out, you're taking not only the trap door, but also that ejector out. That ejector has a spring that sits inside here. That spring is pointed, and the pointed spring has to go into a certain position of that ejector. You have to put the ejector and the trap door together to get the pin to go back through. It took me no less than, and I'm not joking, an hour the first time I took this out to get it back in. And I swore I would never do it again. You can clean the trap door. There are two other screws, one that will take this lever off, and then there's one on the underside here that you can use to take the firing pin out. So you don't have to take the trap door off to do that. So unless you really, really want to put yourself through some torture, leave the trap door there, because getting that ejector and the trap door and the pin through both of them is really, really difficult. So that is it. This is, like I said, it's a very simple firearm for a very simple soldier. Nice cruciform bayonet, a percussion cap type of lock, but it actually hits a firing pin instead of a percussion cap. So that's the difference. That's the change. And it fires a 45 caliber bullet, and they use it for well over um, almost 27, 28 years that it was in the inventory. So it's a very long serving. It would eventually get replaced by the Krag Jorgensen, the U.S. Springfield model 1892 Krag Jorgensen, which, by the way, is what's going to be in our next series. We're going to move from the 1873 to the 1892. Now, these were kept in service all the way through the Spanish-American War. So when I say it was a model of 1892 Krag Jorgensen, and I'll explain this in the Krag Jorgensen, just because a country adopts a rifle in a year doesn't mean it can equip all of its forces in that same year. It takes years of building rifles after you adopt it to get it to all of your forces. So they kept these around, and after they changed over to the Krag Jorgensen with all the regulars, the National Guard, reserves, volunteers were still using the Springfield Trapdoor for quite a few years until they finally made enough Krag Jorgensens to switch over. But we'll discuss that in the next video of our series. So that is it for this video and this series, video number 1 of the U.S. Army and U.S. military main battle rifle series. So this is video 1. Video 2 will come out, and that will cover the next one in the series, the Krag Jorgensen. And then we're going to keep going all the way through World War I, the interwar period, World War II, and Korea. So that's it for today. I hope you liked the video. Like, leave a comment, or ask a question. And hey, why not subscribe to Blue Liner Milsurps? Hey, thanks for hanging out with me, everybody, and talking about the black powder cartridge Springfield Trapdoor model 1873 and this beautiful rifle. So hey, I'll see you in the next one. Have a great rest of your day or rest of your week, whatever the case may be. Bye-bye, everybody.